I'm going to read and reply to a comment sent to me on Patreon from Theo. Theo is not just a fan or a supporter, he's really a super fan. Sometimes I quote myself and I can't find the quote, and he knows what video I'm quoting. I'm like, where's the video where I said this about this topic or something? So Theo knows my material really well, and one of the reasons for that is that he has been doing some kind of archive work, I'd say. He's been looking around a lot at what's been going on in the vegan movement, and he's been kind of piecing together links to different articles by different vegans, and different websites and different videos and so on. My best girl Melissa is sitting here just off camera next to me. She can chime in anytime. Anyway, so Theo writes, quote, I don't know the timeline of your journey into vegan activism too well. I know you've had an affinity for charity ever since you felt betrayed by parents indoctrinating you into communist ideology. Sometime around when you were studying Buddhism, doing humanitarian aid, etc., etc. So I'll read the rest of this paragraph. This is an interesting point. So he's saying that I've had an affinity for charity work, and this is somehow linked to growing up with parents who were communists and my own rejection of communism. So I had a longtime friend and frenemy called Philip, who you know some stories about, babe. And Philip grew up with Christian parents, and he felt that he was indoctrinated into a form of Christianity that he despised. And they were not, I don't know if anyone can be called a normal Christian, but they were not quite normal Christians, it has to be said. They liked going to Nigeria, not just to do charity work, but because they liked the really hardline, extreme form of Anglican and Protestant Christianity they got out there. They didn't find Christianity harsh enough, or biblical enough, or whatever you want to say. And I think probably homophobia and so on played a role in that. So that was where they felt comfortable, was as being white missionaries in that part of Africa. Anyway, but I said to Philip before, when he was complaining about his own parents, I said, possibly if we had switched families at birth, if he had been raised in my family and I would have been raised in his family, ironically, it's quite possible I would have accepted my parents' ideology just because the charity aspect meant so much to me. I think that was really almost an instinctive thing, from childhood forward for me. I can't say that was something I ever thought about. Like, you ask me, why does charity matter to me so much? I think for many people it is. I don't know if that's for 10% of the population or 50% of the population. But, the basic concept of doing the best you can, trying to help others. To give you an example, how did you feel, babe, when you were a kid and you saw someone who was mentally retarded, saw someone or interacted, saw someone on the street, like not on the news? You know what I mean? When I was a child, I felt very strongly when I interacted with mentally retarded people, including people like born with Down syndrome. I'm talking about severe forms of retardation, not some minor thing. I really wished I could help them. I felt this terrible yearning to want to try to help them, and the powerlessness of knowing I couldn't, and also knowing that, in terms of what your parents and teachers, you're told by your parents and teachers to keep your distance, and not without reason. You, as a little kid, it is probably dangerous for you to interact with or play with mentally disabled people. So, that, for me, I think I had that out the gate. I had that out when I came out the box. I came out from day one. I don't think that was something taught to me. No, on the other, so look, other kids also, if they had parents who were communists, would have responded to and questioned other aspects of the ideology, not just the charity aspect. But from my perspective as a child, very clearly, the validity of communism really stood or fell with the same claims to validity the Catholic Church often uses. So I remember there was a really crappy mainstream movie, The Da Vinci Code. Okay, so I saw like 5 minutes of that movie while washing dishes and changed the channel. Honestly, I'll tell you the truth. If I watched that movie, I'd have no shame. But I remember that was on TV in some circumstance like that. And in at least the movie version, the main character confronts this this representative of the Catholic Church, and he sort of says, your church is built on lies. And the representative of the Catholic Church, he's a cardinal or a deacon or something, he's some reasonably ranking person, he says back that his church washes the feet of the poor and feeds and houses the homeless, and this is their claim to legitimacy. Now, I remember I just laughed at that at the time. It was just ridiculous. When you donate money to the Catholic Church, do you want to know what percentage of it goes to feeding the poor, and what percentage of it goes to housing, clerical scholars and priests and nuns in some kind of luxury? And, I'm not hating, you just can't kid yourself. What are you paying for? Are you paying for the Pope to live in luxury? Or are you paying for the poor to live in poverty? If you wanted a charity that was devoted to helping the poor, it wouldn't look anything like the Catholic Church, right? In its design or function, what have you. But that was always striking to me. And then only when I was a teenager, but late in my teenage years, when I was in university, I read that book by Karl Popper. So the particular book by Karl Popper has a tough title. The title is The Poverty of Historicism. A bunch of his other books have catchy titles, just not that one. And there, for the first time, I saw someone openly talking about the extent to which Catholicism and communism really had things in common, in terms of their appeal, and that resonated with me too. I could see, this is a really meaningful critique of both, frankly. Anyway, something that as I've said to you recently was kind of a family secret also, was the extent to which my father was drawn to Christianity, and for maybe 10 years of his life really believed in Christianity. I always thought that was very telling, that the same people who were seduced by communist extremism, not moderate communism, are seduced by Christianity. And I don't think I ever told you this story, but I met one professor in China, and she didn't admit it to me. She admitted to my ex-wife, and then I heard from her, that she actually had a period where she had lost faith in communism, and she briefly went over to, like she considered formally converting to, but she started going to church. She was being seduced by basically American-style Christianity. And she said directly, because it made the same kind of promises, it had the same kind of appeal for her. So she wasn't sleepwalking through that. It wasn't like somebody else's analysis. So there is an interesting kind of parallel there. But again, I started this by saying, in all due humility, that kind of charitable instinct, I think, was so important to me that it's quite possible, if I'd been raised by Christian parents, even crazy Christian parents, even specifically my friend Philip's crazy Christian parents, that I would have found so much value in the charity side of what they were doing that I don't know. I don't know what I would have done with it. I don't know what direction I would have taken that in. But, the claims to charity on the part of communism are pretty paper thin. I've never heard anyone really try to justify, for example, the American war in Vietnam as charity. Like, to really justify, like, why are you bombing Vietnam as charity? I've never heard someone really try to justify the American war in Afghanistan as charity, which is another parallel thing. And the communists had the same problem. The communists also invaded Afghanistan. They invaded and conquered Afghanistan. People now forget. They had their own history. So that they overlap in that specific example. But I mean, that's only one example. But to look at any of those episodes in the history of communism in Russia or in China, it's very hard to give a charitable reading to them. So that really is like a pun or a play on words. But, hey, I'm not joking around for no reason here. So it's an interesting point Theo is opening with here. So again, coming back to Theo's letter to me, he says, quote, "I know you've had an affinity for charity ever since you felt betrayed by your parents indoctrinating you into a communist ideology, and I kind of see that the other way around. Because the charitable instinct was so strong in me, there was this tendency to judge communism against charity, against the social function of charity. Are you trying to help other people or not? And keep it all the way real. Remember, my father had real kind of rage and sorrow. My mom, too. That whole generation from the Vietnam War, specifically the Vietnam War. Shout out to Tana Mongeau. Tana Mongeau's father also totally ruined by the Vietnam War. I mean, a lot of people were in that generation. And, for my parents, and for a lot of people their age, their response to the Vietnam War had nothing to do with charity. It was real hatred and rage and sorrow. It was a real sense they wanted to destroy the United States. They wanted an angry fist, And I didn't see the world. I mean, I think they were wrong to see it that way also. I mean, I think they were both incorrect and morally wrong to see it that way. But you have to realize a lot of those people got involved with left-wing politics, and they didn't have any charitable motives, and it wasn't at all like the way I felt as a child, seeing images of poor and starving people on television. I mean, as a child, I never saw that in real life. But in real life, you'd see maybe homeless people on the street, see people living in poverty in different situations. But you see, when I was a kid, babe, this may be true for you too, there were a lot of images, especially of Ethiopia. Ethiopia was the kind of sterling example of poverty, maybe for your generation, instead of Haiti. So you would have been pretty young when the earthquake in Haiti happened, or something, this kind of thing. I'm just giving you examples.
When I was in high school, my choir did a tribute concert.
Oh, yeah?
And, raised money. Yeah.
But anyway, the image of poverty and starvation, and then the question of what do we do from here. And I mean, I guess I can get into this in a separate video, but for all of us, I mean, that's ultimately what it comes down to, is the number of hours in a day, and how you can make any of these aspirations, to save the world, compatible with the challenge of keeping a roof over your head, or providing a decent standard of living to your own kids if you have kids, or any of these other things. I remember, so there's a saying in Buddhism, this is in Mahayana Buddhism, but they say, it is in some moderately ancient texts, but not the most ancient text in Buddhism, where it says, practice the Dharma as if your hat is on fire, you know, as if you're wearing a hat that's on fire. And, you know, a lot of religions have that spirit of, like, the world is going to end, so work really hard and devote yourself to this or whatever. I mean, veganism, it's weird. I don't feel that the world is going to end. I feel that the world is bad and is getting worse. But I mean, it's a horrible, I mean, it's an absolutely horrible cosmology we live with as vegans, ethically and ecologically. And, you know, I do still ask myself that question every day. You know, how would you live your life if you were trying to save the world? I have a daughter. My daughter's 4 years old. I do prioritize spending time with my daughter. I do burn the jet fuel to fly from Canada to France and spend my 15 days with my daughter, you know, and all these things. But sure, when we're looking at these options, it would be a wonderful delusion if I thought that getting a PhD in ecology could make any difference in the world, even on this YouTube channel. I don't think if I got a PhD in ecology it would even help this YouTube channel in any way. I don't think it would help the vegan world in any way. If I got a PhD in ecology, I don't think there's anything I could do that Gary Francione hasn't already done, or even that Gary Yourofsky hasn't already done, without having a PhD in ecology. So both of us are people now who are looking at more higher education. We had a video on it recently, looking at whether or not we should become lawyers, go to law school. But then you look at that and you contrast it to, you know, going to get a degree in culinary arts, getting a degree in baking, getting a degree in pastries, working in a kitchen, rolling out bread, and ask yourself what can really be a platform for making that difference in the world. Anyway, it's heavy. So we were laughing and joking around a lot before we came on camera. But I mean, that it really is the burden. I mean, you know, I've got to say, it's the burden that I've lived with all my life. I really do feel that way. But veganism gave me a coherent framework and a lens to understand it and express it much better than before. Because Melissa was exactly like me in this. Before I was vegan, I cared way more about never owning a car. And by the way, I still never have owned a car. I still never have driven a car. Right? And then after I was vegan, you see that kind of thing in this much, much more meaningful, quantitative framework. You know, and I remember, like, some of my ex-girlfriends, when I first got with them, they were really hyper about never using a plastic bag. And I said to them, do you want me to show you the stats? Do you want me to show you what percentage of the human waste stream, that's what people call it, the human waste stream, is reusable plastic bags? Do you want me to show that, and the difference between using a reusable and a disposable? Do you want me to show that? I can get you that now. And in some studies, you know, the reusable plastic bags cause more garbage than the disposable. It's a really near thing. It's like, okay, and now do you want to look at the difference between, you know, meat versus tofu? This kind of thing. I'm not saying veganism's the only, you know, ecological or ethical cause, but veganism was both the ineluctable conclusion of those questions and those misgivings, and it was also something where once I switched into veganism, all those other questions, you know, made more sense. It precisely, in the strictest sense of the word perspective, it put all the other problems in perspective. You could see what was big and what was in fact small but close to you, you know, in contrast to things that really were huge but perhaps, you know, more remote. Maybe we can practice doing the puppet show together.
Yes, that's all I needed. I need it all.